Marcus Robinson had only asked the guard one question: why just us? In seconds, his wife was forced off the bus, his daughter's backpack ripped open on the asphalt. No drugs, no weapons, just a coloring book and a crushed juice box. The white passengers watched, silent, until one secret video leaked everything. But what no one knew was who Marcus really was. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The air inside the United Intercity bus had been still, humming only with the soft rumble of tires against asphalt and the occasional cough or shifting of a restless passenger. They were on mile 12 of the road from Atlanta to Charlotte, cutting through the sparse Georgia countryside, when the driver's voice crackled over the intercom. Scheduled stop, 10 minutes only. Marcus Robinson stretched in his seat, grateful for the break. He reached across to squeeze Janelle's hand, their fingers interlacing in silent comfort. Across the aisle, their daughter Ayanna peeked out the window, notebook on her lap, sketching the curve of the clouds, with the kind of innocent concentration only children her age still possessed. They'd been looking forward to this trip for weeks. A journalism conference in Charlotte, where both Marcus and Janelle were set to speak. They were veterans in the field. Marcus, an investigative reporter known for fearless deep dives into education inequity. Janelle, a culture columnist whose recent piece on gentrification in Atlanta had gone viral. The three of them rarely traveled together for work, but this conference was different, family-friendly, with a kids' media workshop Ayanna had begged to attend. When the bus eased into a dusty rest area near a Shell station, Marcus stood, stretching again before gently nudging Ayanna. "Come on, sweetie. Bathroom break." As they disembarked, a man wearing a tan uniform and mirrored sunglasses leaned against a black SUV parked just off the curb. He wasn't in a police car, and there were no state insignia, just a generic security patch stitched over his chest. He was tall, broad-shouldered, white, and chewing gum with slow authority. His presence felt off, but Marcus said nothing. They returned 5 minutes later with a bottle of water and granola bars. Resettling into their seats, that's when the man boarded. No one said a word. Passengers exchanged quick, confused glances. But the mood remained uncertain, more curious than alarmed. The man walked slowly down the aisle, his boots clacking against the rubber floor. "Security inspection," he announced, voice cold, rehearsed. "Federal compliance. Stay seated." He didn't flash a badge, didn't identify himself by name, just started moving, scanning passengers like livestock. When he reached the third row, his eyes locked onto the Robinsons. He stopped. "You three. IDs. Now." Marcus blinked. "I'm sorry. What's this about?" "Routine inspection. Let's go." Janelle shifted in her seat. "We weren't told there'd be any inspection. Who are you with?" The man raised an eyebrow. "You want to cooperate, or you want to delay this bus for everyone?" His voice was flat, but held a pointed threat. A woman in the row behind them stiffened. The college student 2 seats up paused his music and slowly removed his earbuds. Marcus kept his tone even. "We don't mind cooperating, but can you show us your credentials first?" The guard let out a short laugh, more scoff than amusement. "You see my badge?" he said, gesturing to the stitched-on security emblem. "That's all you need." Ayanna clutched her notebook tighter. Reluctantly, Marcus handed over his ID. Janelle followed. The guard studied them like they were fake bills at a liquor store. Then he gestured to Ayanna. "She's a minor," Marcus said. "I didn't ask for commentary." Janelle narrowed her eyes. "She doesn't have ID. She's 11. The guard clicked his tongue. "Well, that's convenient." Passengers looked away. Some shifted uncomfortably, while others kept their eyes glued to their phones, pretending not to see, not hear. The man looked around the bus as if checking for backup, then reached for his walkie. "Got a family with no verifiable ID for the kid. Proceeding to bag inspection." "No," Janelle said firmly. "You're not going through our things without cause." "You refusing inspection?" "I'm refusing to be targeted without explanation." The guard leaned in, voice lowered but loaded. "Lady, if I were you, I'd drop the attitude. I'm giving you a chance to make this easy. Don't push me." Marcus's jaw clenched. His fists tightened in his lap, though he kept his voice calm. "We know our rights. If there's a legitimate reason to search our property, we'll comply, but not under intimidation." The guard stood up straight, eyes scanning again for support. None came. Even the driver stared forward, hands gripped on the wheel like a man hoping to disappear. A soft sound broke the tension. A phone camera click. Subtle. Quiet. From across the aisle, a white mother nudged her son's hand, whispering something inaudible. The boy, around 13, held his phone low, barely visible between the seats. Then the guard motioned to the overhead storage. "Let's see what you're carrying." Marcus stood. "You're not rummaging through our belongings." The guard's tone shifted. Lower. Harsher. "You people always got something to hide. Always playing victim. But it's always the same story with y'all." The air shifted. Even the ones who'd been silent seemed to breathe differently now. The white woman behind the camera widened her eyes. The college student's fingers froze over his phone. No one said a word. But something had undeniably changed. Janelle stood slowly, her voice cracking through the stale air. "Say that again." The guard stepped back slightly, only a flicker of doubt flashing across his face before he hardened again. "I don't have to explain myself. It's protocol." Marcus reached for his phone. The guard moved faster. "No recording." "Why not?" Janelle challenged. "We're not under arrest. You haven't said what agency you represent. And now you're using racist language. You want to escalate? I'll escalate." Yana let out a small, broken sob. Janelle immediately dropped to her knees beside her, whispering, "It's okay, baby. You're safe. Mommy's here." A ripple of tension flowed through the cabin. The white woman across the aisle, hands trembling, reached for her phone again. The driver finally turned in his seat. "Is there a problem, sir?"
The guard snapped back. "Stay out of it. This is my jurisdiction during inspection."
Janelle stood again, her voice now ice. "What jurisdiction? This is a commercial bus. You're not TSA. You're not a federal agent. You're a glorified rent-a-cop with no probable cause." The guard's face flushed red. His next words dropped with venom. "You people always play victim, but it's always the same story with y'all." Gasps broke the silence. A teenage girl whispered, "Did he just say that?" A couple 2 rows back shifted their phones into position. Marcus stepped in front of his wife and daughter, heart racing. "You need to back off, now." But the guard didn't move. He stared Marcus down, like a lion testing a chain-link fence. And then, a voice came over the intercom. Unfamiliar. "Sir, please report to the front of the bus." The guard paused. "Now," the voice repeated, firmer, louder. Everyone turned. The bus driver's mouth hadn't moved. Then from the front row, a man stood, quiet, gray suit, calm eyes. "Sir, I need to have a word." Outside. And for the first time the guard looked unsure. As he turned, Marcus noticed a small Homeland Security badge clipped to the stranger's belt. The stranger with the Homeland Security badge had barely whispered a word, but the ripple he caused on that United bus hadn't yet settled. As the guard named Hawk stepped toward the front to respond to the summons, the Robinsons remained frozen in place. Janelle instinctively pulled Ayana closer, one hand still on her daughter's trembling back, the other grasping Marcus's wrist. Not tightly, just enough to signal, "Don't move until we know what's happening." The air inside the bus was thick now, saturated with unspoken questions, shame, fear, and something even more dangerous, curiosity. Passengers were no longer pretending not to notice. Phone cameras were out. Quiet clicks echoed like nervous heartbeats. Marcus met the eyes of the teenage boy across the aisle, just long enough to register an unspoken thank you for filming. Then he turned toward the window, trying to focus on anything except the weight pressing down on his chest. And as the silence deepened, the story behind that family, behind the headlines they never sought, began to surface like a long-buried memory demanding to breathe. Just 6 years earlier, Marcus Robinson had stood in the gymnasium of an aging high school on the outskirts of Montgomery, watching a teacher quietly shuffle black students to one side of the bleachers and white students to the other. It had been subtle, effortless. No one said a word, but Marcus saw it, like he always did. He hadn't come as a journalist that day. He'd just been a dad, visiting a friend's classroom, but by the time the final bell rang, he knew he had a story. And when he published The Return of the Color Divide, his investigative piece on informal resegregation in Southern schools, it went national. Award nominations followed, syndication, speaking panels. But the cost was high. His inbox flooded with hate, death threats, veiled warnings. Anonymous messages told him to stay in his lane, to stop stirring up ghosts. But Marcus had never feared ghosts. He feared silence. Janelle had found her calling not far from home, reporting on eviction patterns in Atlanta, where she noticed a disturbing trend: landlords routinely citing maintenance violations as cover for pushing out black tenants in neighborhoods on the brink of gentrification. Her series Paint Peels, People Leave wasn't just journalism. It was war reporting disguised in housing data. She'd interviewed dozens of families living on the edge of displacement, grandmothers forced from century-old homes over alleged broken smoke detectors, single mothers fined for leaving toys in common hallways. Her words didn't rage. They cut surgically. She never screamed injustice. She simply showed it. When she won the Vernon Ellis Prize for Journalism, the room stood for her, but Janelle hadn't smiled. She only thought of the little girl who hugged her goodbye after a final interview, asking, "Will we be in the paper, Miss Janelle? Or will they just erase us like the other people?" Between them, Marcus and Janelle had built reputations as defenders of truth, but not public figures. They rarely gave interviews, avoided Twitter debates, and never used their daughter for PR optics. Even when a national magazine requested a cover story on the power couple changing journalism, they declined. Fame was never the goal. Their work was their present. So most people didn't know what they looked like. They liked it that way. Ayanna, their only child, was the kind of girl who noticed everything and said very little. She had her mother's curiosity and her father's skepticism, dangerous traits in a world that didn't value either in little black girls. By 6, Ayanna was reading Toni Morrison quotes on the fridge and asking what redlining meant. By 8, she was homeschooled, not because her parents didn't trust public education, but because they'd already seen the gaps. How teachers praised her handwriting, but ignored her questions. How other students assumed her hair meant she was mean. How early trauma was treated like attitude. Janelle taught her poetry and protest history. Marcus taught her statistics and skepticism. At 11, Ayanna had already written 3 opinion essays, one of which about children and racial anxiety had been anonymously published by a nonprofit newsletter. But for all her insight, she was still just a child. A child who cried in her mother's lap when a uniformed man told her she might be hiding something. They hadn't planned to take the bus. 2 weeks earlier, their flight to Charlotte had been canceled due to weather. Booking 3 seats last minute proved nearly impossible. Everything was overpriced or oversold. Marcus suggested they drive, but the conference was paying a flat stipend, and the trip would have taken a toll. Ayanna had a sensitive stomach on long car rides, so they settled on United's intercity route, comfortable, efficient, and supposedly safe. But as soon as they entered the Atlanta terminal, Marcus felt it. That pull, that watchful tension. The guard, now identified only by the name on his badge, Hawk, had been standing too close to the exit line, too focused on them as they handed over their tickets. He didn't say anything then, just watched. Marcus told Janelle. She brushed it off. "We're always watched," she said, half laughing. But later as they boarded, she muttered under her breath, "He's still staring." Now, sitting back in their seats after the confrontation, the weight of that early instinct hit harder than ever. They hadn't imagined it. It had been building. In many ways, what happened on that bus wasn't new. It was the quiet echo of what had always happened to them. Disbelief, scrutiny, the need to explain themselves to power. But the violation hit differently when it happened in front of Ayanna. That was the scar no one could see. Janelle's phone buzzed in her pocket. Signal was weak, but texts were coming through now. She pulled it out, her hand still trembling slightly, and opened a message from Tasha Lyman, a fellow journalist and friend. "Janelle, this guy's trying to humiliate us." Onboard United bus, 12 miles out of Atlanta. Security guard named Hawk, searching only us. No cause. No agency. Ayanna's scared. She hit send, barely thinking. Seconds later, the 3 dots danced in reply. Then the text came through. "Tasha, is it the guy from the Atlanta rest stop?" Janelle froze. "What Atlanta rest stop?" The phone nearly slipped from her hand. Marcus noticed the change in her face. "What is it?" She didn't respond. Not immediately. Her mind was already spinning, piecing together names, headlines, lawsuits buried under bureaucracy. She knew Tasha wouldn't say something like that casually. There had been whispers in group chats, journalists being followed, harassed, checked by mysterious contractors. No one could trace. Janelle slowly turned the phone screen toward Marcus. He read the message, and his face went pale. Without a word, Janelle typed one more message. "Send me everything you know about him. Now." The quiet click of phone shutters stopped the room from collapsing under silence. As that stranger escorted Hawk toward the front, the Robinsons remained frozen in a tableau of fear and defiance. Janelle's grip on Ayanna remained steady. Marcus's chest heaved with controlled fury, and all of it orbited around the man they'd only just come to know by one name, Hawk. From the moment he had boarded the bus, Marcus had sensed something distinct in the set of Hawk's shoulders, too measured, too authoritative. Yet witnessing his conduct in that cramped cabin had drawn the outlines of something far more dangerous. Under the yellow glare of fluorescent lights, Hawk's reflection in the window looked stranger. In truth, not just a guard, but a predator cloaked in the illusion of authority. Hawk Hawthorne was no ordinary contractor. 37 tall, his arms tattooed with snake coils and lightning bolts. He bore the distinct look of someone who carried authority as both armor and weapon. His presence had been announced on obscure online forums, not with alarm, but with headlines like "Urban Threats, Patterns You Can't Afford to Ignore," where Hawk wrote about scanning non-traditional behavior zones, code for black neighborhoods, and regular stops that targeted black passengers. In his warped manifesto of security, pattern recognition and gut instincts were virtues, not flaws. Inside the police precinct 5 years prior, past his retirement, forced or otherwise, those words had gotten him into trouble. A young black teenager, Josh Reynolds, had been physically thrown to the ground during a stop under Hawk's authority. It was described as resisting arrest, but witnesses and an eyewitness video said otherwise. The case had vanished from local news, filed under closed, sealed, hushed. Hawk's dismissal followed quietly, officially attributed to behavioral concerns, but without detail. The school district quietly removed the footage, and the media, even the few colleagues who knew Hawk, shifted to other stories. The young boy had dropped out soon after. Now masked in a nondescript uniform, Hawk thrived in the opacity of intercity bus routes, zag after zag of dusty roads, minimal oversight, and private contracts that skirted federal scrutiny. Transportation of black bodies became his unspoken prey, hidden under the narrative of city-to-city drug and gun interdiction, though no contraband had ever been found, just disrupting black families. After the bust-up with the Robinsons, Hawk retreated solaced to the corridor by the driver's seat and pulled out his phone. His reflection in the black screen stared back, an expression of satisfaction. He opened his dashcam app and replayed the footage. Slow, deliberate, the guard's voice, Janelle's calm defiance, Marcus's clenched jaw, Iana's tears, the echo of his power as it crescendoed. Sitting alone, Hawk tapped away at his private blog. New post, caught a family with too many questions. He typed, pattern recognition is seldom wrong. Two journalists with two phones pretending ignorance. Behavior so predictable. Let them claim victimhood. I've got footage. No prying eyes would find it, unless they dug deep. And if they did, he'd have them all buried in media overwhelm. He scrolled through the comments, supportive voices from alt security communities praising his street-smart vigilance. One user wrote, "Nice work, Hawk. Let those media types learn humility." Another, "Gut instinct wins again." But in another browser tab lay something different. Anomalous. A shared drive. A folder titled, Dice Carded. Hawk clicked it open. The interior was a collection of clipped news segments about Reynolds, the teen from the brutality case, a redacted report, autopsy notes, interviews from little-known journalists. He watched the grainy footage of the teen's face pressed into gravel, handcuffed, crying. Then another clip. A confiscated phone playing exit interview footage, where Hawk himself grimaced and said, "They never should have seen me lose control." His dismissal, unhinged, admitted in a moment of rare candor. He clicked to close it. Not for long. Back in the bus, the stranger with the Homeland Security badge, Francis Marlowe, as later discovered, stepped forward, glancing at each passenger. Hawk returned, forced back into character. The cabin's air remained thick, and as Hawk resumed his forced calm, he moved to reopen the confrontation. His lips curved into a punishing smirk. "All right," he said, "we'll pick this up later." A tremor of fear shot through Janelle, but then hard lines formed in her eyes, resolve forming. The lingering, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's not scared. Neither are we. In the background, the driver hit the accelerator, motioning the bus forward. Passengers shifted, photos of the confrontation circulating through feeds, the hashtags growing, though on the bus time felt frozen, and Hawk walked back to his seat, opening that hidden folder again. The reflection of those videos in his eyes flickered like flames, proof that his past wasn't buried. It was reshaped, now leveraged. A faint notification pinged on his phone. A message from his handler, or online ally. "Keep at it. Media will fold under pressure." You win here. Hawk smiled inwardly. But outside the bus window, miles ticking toward Charlotte, something else flickered. A siren in the rearview, faint blue lights glinting. Unmarked, unexpected, unregistered. Hawk looked up, eyes widening. As Hawk rewound the footage once more, a silent text popped on his screen. They're watching you too. The bus hummed again, rolling slowly along the cracked highway. But the energy inside had shifted. Where casual boredom once lingered, there was now a thick tension, unspoken but felt in every subtle movement, every half-averted glance. No one said anything aloud. But silence had its own language. Passengers who had earlier chuckled over snacks or scrolled TikTok now sat stiff, hands hovering over phones, eyes flicking between the Robinson family and the hulking figure of Hawk, who loomed again near the aisle. The space between seats felt smaller, more claustrophobic. No one quite knew what was happening anymore, but everyone felt the line had been crossed, and no one wanted to be the first to step over it. Near the middle row, an older white couple whispered in low tones. The woman clutched her purse tighter, her eyes darting between Hawk and the Robinsons. Her husband leaned close, mumbling, "It's probably all a misunderstanding." She didn't answer, just kept staring forward, mouth a tight line. A few seats back, a young Latina woman in a faded denim jacket gripped the zipper on her backpack like a lifeline. Her name was Carmen, a nursing student traveling back from visiting her grandmother in Atlanta. She had seen the whole thing. Hawk's hostility, the child's tears, the mother's defiant calm. It made her stomach twist. She thought about standing up, saying something, but the memory of her uncle's deportation still lived sharp in her mind, and the way uniformed men could make whole families vanish with just a word. Instead, she remained silent. The zipper on her bag squeaked softly in her tightening grip. 2 rows behind the Robinsons, a young black man in a gray hoodie stared at his phone, thumbs moving rapidly over the keyboard. On a bus from ATL Black Fam, getting harassed by guard named Hawk. Kids crying. No one's doing anything. He hovered over the post button, then stopped. His name was Darren, a junior at Morehouse, journalism major. He knew exactly how this could go. Post this, go viral. Sure, but if the wrong people saw it, his name could be dragged, doxxed, even blackballed from internships. He imagined being told, "We don't want activists, we want journalists." He deleted the draft. His heart thudded in guilt. Meanwhile, Marcus sat rigid, his eyes not on Hawk anymore, but scanning the bus, observing the inaction, the discomfort, the cowardice. He recognized it well. He'd written about it dozens of times. The white liberal silence, the subtle complicity, the way allyship evaporated when it required confrontation, not hashtags. No one had raised a voice for them. Not one person had said, "This is wrong." Even those who had filmed, none had stood. Not yet. He didn't expect heroism. He just wanted acknowledgement. Something human. But he wasn't surprised. Next to him, Janelle gently held Ayana's hand in both of hers, whispering into her ear, low and melodic, "You're safe. You are loved. You are not what he says you are." Ayana didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just watched her mother's face, searching for certainty, for something to grab onto in the middle of this emotional storm. Marcus looked down at them and saw not just his family, but the culmination of centuries of being watched, doubted, and discarded. And now his daughter was absorbing it all, before puberty, before she'd even learned to multiply fractions. He reached over and placed a hand on Ayana's knee, steady and warm. She looked up and smiled faintly, but the light in her eyes had dimmed. Toward the front, Hawk walked the aisle again, slow, exaggerated steps. He didn't speak to anyone directly, but as he passed clusters of seats, he muttered general phrases, like some strange energy on this bus, and might have to escalate protocol. Each pass felt like a warning shot, even if no one was directly targeted. One woman asked, "What do you mean?" But Hawk ignored her and kept walking. His words were less about policy now, and more about presence, control, fear. Across from the Robinsons, the white mother who had filmed earlier stared at her screen. The video was clear. Hawk's voice, his face, the phrase, "You people always play victim." She knew what she had. It was enough to blow up online, maybe even land on the news. Her son looked at her, eyes wide. "You gonna post it?" She hesitated.
"I don't know," she whispered. "What if we get dragged into it?"
He said nothing, just nodded slowly and leaned back. She replayed the clip again. Then again. Her finger hovered over the upload button. Still, she did nothing. No one knew what Hawk was still doing on the bus. He hadn't announced any resolution. He hadn't explained his badge, his presence, or his authority. Homeland Security hadn't said anything either. It felt like a waiting game. And the Robinsons were the ones being made to sit through it. The silence fractured, not with noise but with something worse. Yana tugged gently at Janelle's sleeve. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice soft and hollow. Janelle turned to her. Yana didn't blink as she asked, "Are we the bad people he talks about?" Time slowed. Janelle's heart cracked. Marcus froze. The question didn't come like an accusation. It came like a plea, like a child trying to make sense of a world she thought was safe, but no longer recognized. Janelle wrapped her arms around Ayanna and pulled her close. "No, baby," she whispered, her voice thick. "We are not the bad ones. Not now. Not ever." But her hands were shaking. And 3 rows back, Carmen, the Latina nursing student, closed her eyes, lips trembling. The bus suddenly jerked to a halt, and an overhead voice buzzed out, "Everyone stay seated. We have an unscheduled inspection ahead." The sudden jolt of the bus lurching to a stop didn't rattle Marcus as much as Ayanna's question still echoing inside him. "Are we the bad people he talks about?" That sentence had broken something deep, not just in her, but in him. He kept his eyes forward, watching Hawk's back, as the so-called guard spoke with the driver near the front. The words were muffled, but Marcus saw the tension in the driver's shoulders, the shrug of reluctant obedience, and Hawk's authoritative stance. Something was coming. Another act, another humiliation disguised as procedure. But Marcus didn't move. He couldn't. Not yet. He breathed in deeply, slow and quiet, trying to push the heat rising in his chest down into his feet. This wasn't the first time. It never was. The cruelty of racism wasn't just its presence, but its repetition. The constant requirement that you swallow what no human should have to stay safe. He thought back to that day in college, his sophomore year at Howard University, where he'd transferred after 2 years at a predominantly white institution in Pennsylvania. He'd been jogging around campus, headphones in, hoodie on. Typical morning. A white security officer pulled him over, said he'd been running too fast. Said someone matching his description had been seen fleeing the scene of a theft. There was no theft, no suspect, just a black man moving with purpose. He remembered being pushed against a campus patrol car, the cold of the hood against his cheek, the disbelief morphing into a burning shame, not because of what had happened, but because of how many students had seen it and kept walking. Because even in a black majority space, white authority still moved without apology. He remembered the stillness afterward, sitting in his dorm staring at his hands and thinking, how much smaller do I have to make myself before they stop seeing me as a threat? And now, decades later, that same stillness was sitting in his chest as he sat beside his daughter, knowing she was learning the same lesson too early. He glanced at Janelle. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned pale. Her jaw was clenched, and there was something dangerous flickering behind her eyes. Marcus knew that look. He'd seen it just once before, when Janelle came home from a job interview, crying but refusing to call it that. She'd interviewed at a mid-sized Atlanta newsroom, one of the progressive ones that published diversity editorials, but had never once employed a black managing editor. During the interview, she'd casually mentioned how her reporting often touched on racial equity, and that she'd attended a Black Lives Matter rally after Ferguson. The next day, the polite email came, "While we appreciate your time, we've decided to go in another direction." 2 weeks later, a white colleague with less experience landed the same role. They'd had the conversation with Ayanna too early, about what to do if a teacher accused her of something she didn't do, about how to speak to police, about the tone of voice that would keep her alive. Calm but confident, Janelle had coached. Never raise your voice. Never argue, even when they're wrong. And smile, Marcus had added. His tone bitter that day. They like it when you smile. Makes them feel safe. It was survival, wrapped in etiquette. But there's no guidebook for watching your child's heart break in real time. At the front of the bus, Hawk turned around, sauntering back down the aisle slowly, like a warden doing rounds. His presence was theatrical now, each step measured, his expression unreadable but full of intent. Marcus watched him inch closer, the man's shadow growing over passengers who dared not make eye contact. Janelle's breathing had changed, shorter, faster, Her composure was starting to crack. Marcus knew it, felt it. She leaned toward Hawk as he passed, lips parting. Then she stopped. Whatever she'd been about to say, she swallowed it like poison. Her eyes met Marcus's, and he barely shook his head just once. A subtle plea. Not now, not yet. Don't give them what they want. She turned her face away, bit her bottom lip. Ayanna didn't notice. She was staring at the floor, quietly sketching on her notepad. It wasn't art this time. It was scribbles, tight, repetitive circles, that had torn through the page. Halfway down the bus, a teenage girl, white, maybe 15, leaned in toward her mother, her voice a whisper barely audible beyond their row. This isn't right. Her mother didn't respond. She repeated, louder this time, her voice breaking. Why aren't we saying anything? Passengers nearby turned slightly enough to hear, but not enough to become involved. The mother finally answered, voice strained, almost pleading, because we don't know the whole story. The girl pulled back, incredulous. Her face flushed red, not from embarrassment, but shame. She slumped into her seat, turning toward the window. The driver looked back in the mirror, his hand still on the gear shift.
He said nothing.
Did nothing. Marcus wondered what he was thinking. Maybe he believed it wasn't his fight. Maybe he told himself he couldn't do anything. Or maybe, like so many others, he was just numb to it. One black family in 100. One random inspection among many. It wasn't his daughter crying. The bus slowed again. Outside, only fields and gravel. No rest stop in sight. Then Hawk's voice broke through the intercom, cutting and cold. We're making an unscheduled stop. A pause. There's a situation that needs to be addressed. Gasps scattered across the bus, like sparks from a broken wire. Passengers turned to each other, questions forming on their faces. Marcus reached over and closed Diana's notepad, gently holding her hand in his. Janelle looked up sharply. What does he mean, situation? She asked aloud. Her voice wasn't angry now. It was dangerous in its calm. The white mother who'd filmed earlier unlocked her phone again. Carmen, the young Latina woman, reached for her bag, fingers trembling slightly. The teen girl near the back grabbed her mother's arm. Do something. But it was too late. The bus was already veering toward a desolate gravel lot ahead, bordered by chain-link fences, and the flicker of a flickering security light. No one spoke, because this wasn't just a detour, it was a trap. As the bus doors creaked open in the middle of nowhere, Hawk turned and said, You three, off, now. The bus hissed as it slowed to a stop, the gravel beneath its tires crackling like crushed bone. Dust clouds lifted into the dry Georgia air, swirling under the weight of stillness. No one spoke. The road had narrowed to a nothingness, just a lone gas station with a rusted sign, faded flags flapping tiredly in the heat, and a vending machine that hadn't lit up in years. Inside the bus, tension thickened like wet cloth. Hawk stood near the front, his frame rigid with manufactured calm. He didn't raise his voice, didn't repeat himself with urgency. He didn't need to. The quiet in his command was more dangerous than a shout. You three off. Now. The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus looked up slowly, his body heavy. For a moment he didn't move. Then Janelle stirred beside him, her hand instinctively shielding Ayanna's shoulder. The child shrank slightly beneath her mother's arm. Marcus's voice came low but steady. Why are we being taken off? Further questioning, Hawk replied, already reaching for something in his pocket. Just a few minutes. Standard inspection. For what? Janelle's tone was sharper now. She wasn't moving either. Could be anything. Hawk shrugged. Drugs. Trafficking. Suspicious behavior. The words dropped like stones. Passengers shifted in their seats. Whispers. A few turned to look. One man touched his phone screen, ready to film, but stopped when Hawk's gaze brushed his row. The energy was cowardly and contagious. You know this isn't legal, Janelle said, each word slow and deliberate. You're not a police officer. You're not TSA, you have no warrant. Hawk smiled tightly. Transport security. State authorized. That's enough to justify detaining a suspicious passenger. Marcus turned to the driver, clinging to the last thread of rational authority. Sir, is this authorized? The driver avoided his eyes. His hands remained fixed on the wheel, his face carved in stone. I was told to cooperate with security. That's all I know. He said, the words mechanical. No help was coming. Janelle stood. Marcus followed. Together they gently helped Ayanna to her feet. The child clutched her bag close to her chest. her silence louder than any protest. They stepped off the bus and into the heat. The sunlight slapped them immediately, thick and oppressive. The gas station was silent. No cars at the pumps. No attendant in the booth. It was as if the entire location existed for this one purpose. This moment of public humiliation. Hawk followed them out with the casual stride of a man who knew no one would stop him. He pulled his phone out and began photographing Marcus's driver's license, then Janelle's. Then, without warning, he crouched and pointed the lens at Ayana's small backpack. Marcus stepped forward. "You don't have permission to photograph our child's belongings. She's with you. That's permission enough," Hawk muttered, barely glancing up. "No," Janelle snapped. "She's a minor, and unless you have a warrant or parental consent, this is illegal. Georgia Code." "I don't care about your Wikipedia law degree," Hawk said, standing tall. "You think you know your rights, but out here, you're in my hands." Marcus's fists curled at his sides. "And what do those hands do exactly?" Hawk smiled. "They document, and if needed, detain." Then he stepped closer to Ayana. "Let's see what's in the bag, sweetheart." Ayana immediately took a step back, her grip tightening on the straps. "She's not giving you anything," Janelle said, stepping between them like a shield. Her voice was calm, but dangerous. Hawk held her gaze for a moment, then slowly stepped back, the faintest flicker of frustration passing through his eyes. "Fine," he said. "Suit yourselves. I've got what I need." Ayana's eyes brimmed. A quiet sob escaped her throat. Not a loud cry, but the kind that sinks deep and lingers. Her small body trembled, and she turned away, hiding her face in her mother's coat. Marcus bent down beside her, his voice barely a whisper. "You're okay, baby. You're brave. Just a little longer. Okay?" But in his heart something cracked. He'd spent years preparing Ayana for this world, coaching her on how to survive in white spaces, how to be polite, but assertive, how to hold her tongue but never shrink. But none of that mattered now, not here, in the middle of a gravel lot, at the mercy of a man who saw them not as people, but as problems. This wasn't a lesson. It was a wound. Janelle faced Hawk again, fury barely contained beneath her skin. "You really think this makes you powerful?" she asked, her voice cold. A grown man cornering a family for a bus inspection, harassing a little girl on camera. "You think your camera changes anything?" Hawk said, laughing under his breath. "I've done this 100 times. You think I'm scared of a blog post or a Twitter thread?" Janelle stepped forward now. "Just once." "No. But maybe you should be."
Dad stopped him. Just for a moment.
Then, crunch. Tires rolled over gravel behind them. A slow, steady approach. All four turned to look. A white pickup truck had pulled into the far side of the lot, its windows tinted. It coasted to a stop behind the gas station, idling just far enough to feel ominous. Then the door opened. A tall man stepped out. Boots, sunglasses, tan shirt tucked into dark jeans. A shiny sheriff's badge gleamed on his chest. He walked toward them with a relaxed gait, like a man entering his own backyard. "Everything all right here, Hawk?" he asked casually, as if this were routine. Marcus's heart sank. This wasn't help. This was backup. Another layer of danger. Janelle's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and glanced at the screen. One new message. From Tasha. "Tasha, that man with him? We've seen him before. Be careful." Janelle's face went pale. She looked up from the screen, and the sheriff was already walking toward Ayana. Sheriff Dan Riles walked like the land belonged to him. Every step kicked dust into the air, his heavy boots grinding against gravel with slow arrogance. His thumbs were hooked into his belt, and his smile, if it could be called that, was the kind worn by men who never questioned their own authority. Janelle's phone buzzed again in her palm, but her eyes never left the man's face. The warning from Tasha repeated in her head, like a metronome. "That man with him? We've seen him before. Be careful." Marcus instinctively shifted in front of Ayana, not shielding her completely. He knew better than to provoke, but subtly enough to form a human barrier. Ayana's hands were still wrapped tightly around her backpack. She hadn't let go since they stepped off the bus. "Afternoon, Riles," drawled, voice syrupy with familiarity as he reached Hawk. "Didn't expect to see you this far east." Hawk smirked. "Unexpected stop. Had a little situation brewing." Riles turned toward the Robinsons, with the slow sweep of a lion, eyeing prey. "Ah, I see." He looked at Janelle and Marcus, gaze dragging like sandpaper. "What's the problem?" Janelle straightened. We were pulled off a public bus without cause. Harassed. Our daughter was photographed. We want names and agencies before anything else happens. Riles chuckled. This ain't a courtroom, ma'am. This is field protocol. Marcus stepped in. Field protocol doesn't include racial profiling or detaining a family with no probable cause. The smile dropped from Riles' face. You raising your voice at me? No, Marcus said. Steady. I'm stating facts. There was a long pause. Then Riles looked at Hawk and said, just loud enough to be heard. They always come with the law books, don't they? Inner city types travel light, but dirty. No luggage, but always got a legal argument. Janelle felt her stomach twist. She pressed record on her phone, sliding it discreetly into her jacket pocket. Camera lens barely exposed. Riles noticed the movement. You filming me? Janelle didn't answer. I'll make it plain, ma'am, Riles said, stepping closer. This is a one-party consent state, but I'll remind you we're on private property. You want to test local ordinance, you better have a whole team of lawyers ready. Marcus's voice broke through the rising heat. I want to speak to legal counsel. Now, Riles turned on him with sudden venom. You think this is Atlanta? You think you're in some liberal suburb where you can bark orders and we roll over? Marcus didn't move. I know my rights. Riles stepped even closer, their faces just inches apart now. You keep talking like that and you'll be obstructing a security investigation. You want your daughter to watch her daddy get cuffed for running his mouth? That hit hard. Ayanna whimpered, shrinking further into her mother's coat. Janelle dropped to her knees beside her, whispering into her hair, trying to calm her down even as her own hands shook. You're okay, baby. Mommy's here. Don't let them make you afraid. But she was afraid. Not of violence. Not of being arrested. But of how normal this all felt for men like Hawk and Riles. How deeply embedded this performance was in their lives. Harassment masquerading as duty. Threats hidden in policy. And how many people would just nod along? Behind them, the bus idled quietly. Passengers watched from behind tinted windows, like spectators at a one-sided chess match. No one opened the door. No one stepped off. Inside, Carmen had her phone in hand, recording from the seat next to the white mother. The boy now holding the original video kept nudging his mom. We have to do something, he whispered. His mother looked down, the weight of hesitation all over her face. We will, she finally murmured. Just not yet. Outside, Riles moved toward Janelle. You said you were journalists? He asked, fake interest dripping in his tone. We are, Janelle said, her voice flat. Not from any real outlet, I'd wager. We've won national awards. Well, that don't change much here. Then he looked directly at Ayanna, his words deliberate. You know, sometimes kids need to see consequences early. Janelle stood between them again, hand rising instinctively. Do not speak to my daughter. The moment froze. Even Hawk shifted. But Riles backed up, both hands raised like he'd just remembered he was being watched. Well, he said, spitting onto the dirt. Maybe y'all aren't worth the paper you think you're printed on. Then a voice broke the standoff. Quiet. Firm. Just behind them. You're being watched. I sent the video. Everyone turned. The white mother from the bus stood near the edge of the gravel lot, phone in hand, her son beside her. Riles narrowed his eyes. Who are you? Someone who's tired of seeing this, she said. I uploaded it 40 minutes ago. You're trending. Hawk turned sharply to her. You did what? I filmed the whole thing, she said. And guess what? My sister works in media. It's already in 5 inboxes. She stepped closer, holding the phone like a torch in the dark. I wasn't going to. I was scared. But then your friend. She looked at Riles, started talking about inner city types. Behind her, Carmen stepped off the bus with her own phone. And I recorded that part too. Suddenly, there were more witnesses than threats. More phones than guns. And Riles wasn't smiling anymore. Hawk's radio crackled. HQ here. Stand down, you're on camera. Fall back now. The Georgia's sun had just begun its slow descent, but the real heat was now radiating through fiber optic cables, not the asphalt. Standing just outside the frame of chaos, the white mother Emily Caldwell watched her son nervously cradle his phone. She hadn't intended for any of this. She was just a parent, a witness, someone who had grown tired of explaining to her child why silence is safer. But her son, he was different. He tapped the post button before she could stop him. The caption read, "This family is being harassed for being black. This is America." The video was raw. No filters. No edits. Just a shaky capture of Hawk barking orders, Riles making his inner city jab, and a little black girl shrinking behind her mother. It was brutal in its simplicity. Truth, unadorned. Within 12 minutes, the video crossed 100,000 views on Twitter. By the 20-minute mark, it had breached Instagram and TikTok. 42 minutes later, it stood at 1.2 million views, a tidal wave with no sign of slowing. Hashtags erupted like brush fires across social media. Bus justice. That's all. Ayanna deserves better. The name Ayanna caught on faster than anyone expected. A screenshot of her tiny, frightened face became the defining image of the moment. It was reshared with quotes from civil rights leaders, current activists, and everyday strangers, who saw in her eyes the pain that had echoed across generations. One post read, "This isn't the 1960s, but the soundtrack hasn't changed." Another, "Ayanna is every little black girl who's ever had to be brave too soon." The tweets weren't just outrage, they were strategy. Civil rights organizations began tagging United bus lines, demanding a formal response. Prominent lawyers offered pro bono support. Even the ACLU reposted the clip with the message, "This is why oversight matters." Inside the United headquarters in Chicago, chaos rippled across every floor. Executives scrambled into damage control, legal teams dialed crisis consultants, and marketing tried to find an angle that wouldn't make things worse.
One bold intern whispered, "Maybe we should just admit fault?"
He was promptly silenced. A tweet went live from the company account. "We are investigating an incident involving a contracted employee. Safety and fairness are our top priorities." It backfired instantly. Within 10 minutes, it had over 30,000 quote tweets, mostly filled with disbelief, screenshots of Hawk's old blog posts, and side-by-side clips of Ayanna's face with the caption, "Does this look like safety to you?" Meanwhile, back in the dusty lot, Hawk remained blissfully unaware. He stood near the back of the bus, talking low with Riles, glancing occasionally toward the Robinsons. He hadn't yet checked his phone. Neither had the sheriff, who leaned casually against his truck like a man who'd seen this movie a dozen times before, and always survived the ending. But the crowd around them was shifting. Carmen, the nursing student, stood just outside the bus steps, her phone still recording. Another passenger, a black man in a brown hoodie, uploaded his own footage, this time focusing on Hawk's face as he glared at the child. Across platforms, angles multiplied. Each post became a piece of evidence. Janelle sat on the ground now. Ayanna curled in her lap like a small bird with nowhere left to fly. Her phone buzzed nonstop in her jacket pocket, the notifications growing louder, more frequent, more urgent. She finally pulled it out and stared. Her inbox had exploded. Journalists, friends, colleagues. One message, from her old newsroom partner Jerome Fields, stood out. "Janelle, it's you, right? I saw the video. I'm so sorry, I'm calling editors. This is going to the front page." Another, from a former professor. "You once said journalism wasn't just about truth, it was about timing. Your time is now." Even those who once dismissed her pitches were suddenly interested in collaboration. The irony was sharp enough to taste. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. But somehow, her story had already traveled further than she ever expected. Beside her, Marcus refreshed his Twitter feed and blinked in disbelief. His own name was trending. A slow, reverberating panic hummed beneath his skin, not out of shame, but out of clarity. He knew exactly what viral fame did to black families. It started with empathy, surged with outrage. But if you weren't careful, it turned into scrutiny, deconstruction, mistrust. He'd seen it too many times. Black pain turned into clickbait, then slowly into questions. But for now, the world was on their side, and he knew they had to use that momentum fast. At the front of the bus, the driver sat frozen. He glanced at his side mirror and finally noticed half the passengers were filming. Not pretending, not hiding, just recording. Even Emily's son stood on the side, giving updates in real time to a growing number of viewers on Instagram Live. "This is the United bus," he said. "Route ATL to Charlotte. This girl, Ayanna, they pulled her off like she was a threat. Just for being black." Thousands watched. One verified journalist typed, "Where is this? Someone drop a pin. I'm calling legal now." And then Hawk's radio buzzed. He answered it lazily. "Yeah." A second later, his spine stiffened. "HQ here. You're live on 5 platforms. You're trending worldwide. Fall back immediately. Do not speak." Do not touch the family. Do not say a word. We're dispatching regional supervisors now. His jaw twitched. Copy that, he muttered. Riles noticed the change. What's up? But Hawk didn't answer. His fingers finally reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. The screen lit up. Twitter, Instagram, text messages. He read the captions, saw the hashtags, clicked on a post with 1.3 million views. His own face, frozen mid-sneer as Ayanna hid behind Janelle. The tide had turned, and it was dragging him under. Marcus's phone buzzed. A notification. Direct message. He opened it. CNN producer. Verify. Mr. Robinson, we're covering this now. You are trending. We go live in 20. Can you speak? He stared at the message for a long moment, then looked at Janelle, who stared back with tired but resolute eyes. She nodded once. Marcus began typing his reply. But before he could hit send, a man in a gray suit approached from the far end of the parking lot.
No badge. No uniform.
Just calm, heavy steps. He stopped beside Marcus and tapped his shoulder lightly. You might want to hear this, he said. Marcus turned. The man added, calmly. Homeland Security just called. They're asking for you. Marcus looked up and saw two more black SUVs pulling into the lot. Unmarked, tires rolling slow and silent. The temperature in the lot had dropped slightly, as dusk began to pull its blanket across the sky, but the heat inside Marcus's chest hadn't faded. Neither had the pressure behind Janelle's eyes or the weight Ayanna carried in her silence. All around them, phones buzzed with outrage, retweets, DMs, viral stats, proof that the world had finally noticed. But what good was being seen, if no one stepped in? They were still on the gravel, still surrounded by uniforms, still waiting. Ayanna's head had dropped against her mother's shoulder. She hadn't spoken in 15 minutes, hadn't looked up once, since the man in the gray suit had whispered about Homeland Security. Her small arms hung limp at her sides, and her fingers, usually fidgeting, sketching, or scribbling observations, lay still. Janelle felt it first. A small, wet drop on her forearm. Then another. She looked down. Yana had a nosebleed. Oh God, she breathed. Marcus immediately pulled out a napkin from his pocket, still warm from lunch. Baby, look at me. Tilt your head forward, not back. Ayanna didn't move. Janelle cradled her gently, guiding her daughter's chin downward, holding the napkin under her nose with trembling hands. She's overwhelmed, she said quietly. This is too much. A Homeland officer stood a few feet away but didn't intervene. That silence was the worst part of all. This parade of authority that didn't protect, didn't console, didn't even acknowledge, even as their video soared past 3.8 million views, with hashtags like Justice for Ayanna climbing into trending slots in Brazil and South Africa. The Robinsons were still treated as potential threats. Reporters began calling Janelle directly. Somehow, her old number had leaked. She glanced at her phone and saw a flood of names. Journalists, editors, talk show producers. She ignored them all. One voicemail caught her eye. From her old friend and former colleague, Claudia Spence. Jay, I'm seeing what's happening. The newsroom is demanding coverage. CNN wants you. But more than that, I just want to say, I'm so sorry. Call when you can breathe. Janelle wanted to cry. But crying required energy she didn't have. Marcus stood now, pacing in slow, tight lines. His jaw was clenched, his thoughts spinning in a whirlwind of helplessness. He could debate a panel of experts on systemic racism. He could break down incarceration statistics on live TV. But right now, as a father watching his daughter bleed under the pressure of being made into a national symbol, he was a man trapped in place. He looked over at Hawk, who was still hunched by his vehicle, phone pressed to his ear. His back was rigid now, not cocky, not confident. His posture had changed. And that meant something was shifting. Yes, sir, I know. I did. Hawk's voice was tight, defensive. He was trying to sound composed, but even from several feet away, Marcus could hear the panic slipping through. A pause, then Hawk lowered his voice. Listen, they were acting suspicious. Another pause, then louder. I didn't profile them. I followed procedure. His free hand balled into a fist at his side. He glanced at Marcus, and for the first time all day there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Inside the bus, Emily Caldwell sat beside her son, both of them watching the spectacle like bystanders at a crime scene. Her hands were still shaking, her mouth dry. She hadn't expected to feel this guilty. This complicity. She hadn't expected to care this much about people she hadn't known a few hours ago. But Iana's question, "Are we the bad people he talks about?" still haunted her. She looked at her phone again. Another notification. Another million views. Another news outlet asking for permission to use her video. A part of her wanted to say no, but that part was smaller now, drowned out by something else. Something louder. Something older. Responsibility. Behind the bus, the gray-suited man reappeared. He walked up to the Homeland agent and whispered something that made the man stiffen slightly, then nod. Marcus watched it all, with careful eyes. Another SUV had parked across the lot. Inside it sat 3 more men in plain clothes, heads down, phones out. Every now and then, one would look up, scan the crowd, and return to the screen. This wasn't just about viral outrage anymore. Something bigger was unfolding. Hawk's phone rang again. This time, he answered immediately. But his greeting was flat. No fake bravado. Yes. A pause. Then understood. He ended the call, breathing hard. Marcus didn't move. But Hawk did. He walked toward Riles, who leaned against his truck, still pretending the cameras didn't matter. "They want us to back off," Hawk muttered. Riles snorted. "They? Corporate." Riles's jaw tightened. "They don't run my town. They run the contract." Riles turned slowly toward the bus. His face hardened. Hawk didn't answer. He just looked away. At that moment, a black sedan pulled into the gas station. A man stepped out in a crisp suit, phone still at his ear. His stride was fast, direct. The kind of walk that cut through conversations and power struggles without asking permission. He was a United executive. He walked straight to Sheriff Riles, still speaking as he approached. "Yes, I have eyes on the family now. This ends here." Then, for the first time, he stopped, looked Riles dead in the eye, and delivered the sentence that changed the course of the day. "Release them, or it's your badge." Sheriff Riles's smirk faded, but his hand moved toward his belt. The sun had all but dipped below the tree line by the time the tension finally cracked. The air, heavy with diesel fumes and quiet outrage, felt suffocating as the executive from United, still sharp in his tailored suit, stood face to face with Sheriff Dan Riles. "You heard me," the man repeated, slower this time, his tone leaving no room for debate. "Release them, now, or your department will be named in a civil rights lawsuit by morning." Riles's eyes flicked toward Hawk, then to the black SUVs that now dotted the edge of the parking lot. Homeland agents had exited their vehicles but kept a professional distance, their presence more symbolic than functional. The power in the lot had shifted completely, and for the first time Riles wasn't holding the reins. Still, he resisted. His fingers hovered near his belt, not on his weapon, but near his radio, one last attempt at control. "This is what happens," he muttered, barely audible. "Woke nonsense ruins policing. Can't even ask a question anymore without being called racist." The words stung like a slap, not because they were new, but because they were so predictably old. Marcus took a step forward, eyes locked on Riles. "I want an incident report. Names, badge numbers, everything." Riles sneered. "Not your jurisdiction. This happened to my family. And now it's over." "No, it's not," Marcus said, voice like iron. "We're not done." But Riles turned his back, his answer given in silence. The Robinsons were free to go. No apology, no report, no accountability. Just dismissed. Janelle stood, helping Ayana to her feet. The girl's face was flushed, cheeks streaked with dried blood and tears. Her backpack felt like an anchor across her small shoulders. She didn't speak. She didn't look up. She simply clung to her mother's arm like a lifeline. The bus engine was running again. Passengers peeked from behind window shades, watching the family from a distance. Some ashamed, others relieved, none intervening. A Homeland agent approached. "You're clear to reboard now." Iana shook her head instantly. Her voice cracked, brittle as glass. "No." Janelle knelt beside her. "Baby, it's almost over. I'm not getting back on," Iana whispered. "Not that bus." She didn't cry. She didn't yell. Her voice was steady, but it was final. Janelle looked up at Marcus. "No words needed." He nodded. "Then we're not getting back on either." It was Carmen, the nursing student, who made the call. She'd stayed quiet most of the time, but now, as Ayana refused the bus, Carmen stepped up and tapped something into her phone. 15 minutes later, a sleek black van pulled into the lot. The windows were tinted, the paint pristine. A small placard on the side read, "Good Ride ATL, Black owned, people first. Community always." The driver stepped out, middle-aged, locks tucked under a cap, kind-eyed. "You the Robinsons?" he asked gently. Janelle nodded. "Come on," he said. "Your ride's covered. Whole trip. All the way to Charlotte. On us." Marcus blinked, stunned. "Who sent you?" "Word travels. We don't let our people ride alone." As they loaded into the van, Ayana hesitated at the door. The driver noticed. He crouched slightly, meeting her at eye level. "It's okay, sweetheart. No yelling here. No surprises. Just a ride. We good?" Ayana gave the faintest nod. Then she stepped in. The bus behind them began pulling out slowly, its headlights slicing through the dusk. Passengers inside were silent. On her phone, Emily Caldwell watched the United corporate Twitter feed refresh. A new tweet had gone live. "At United, we value all riders equally. We regret that a recent incident has caused concern. We are investigating in good faith." She stared at it in disbelief. Equal? A child had bled from her nose in fear. A family had been publicly interrogated for simply existing. And the company thought this was enough? She retweeted the post with the caption, "This isn't equality. This is PR spin. Justice for Ayana." Thousands agreed. The comments flooded in. "This is insulting. They're gaslighting us in real time. This is why people don't trust institutions." Somewhere in a motel room not far from the scene, Hawk finally turned on the TV. He'd been hiding, trying to distance himself from the viral surge by shutting off his devices and claiming poor signal. But now he knew it was no longer avoidable. His face stared back at him from the screen, paused mid-sentence, mouth curled into that fateful smirk. The caption beneath read, "Viral harassment. Security guard accused of racial profiling on United bus." Then came the audio. His voice, clear as crystal. "You people always play victim, but it's always the same story with y'all." He flinched. He didn't remember saying it that loud. Didn't remember the cameras so close. Didn't think it would follow him this far. The news anchor continued. "Hawk Hawthorne, a former officer turned private contractor, now faces national backlash after a video shows him targeting a black family and photographing their child's belongings during a bus ride in Georgia." Hawk grabbed the remote and turned the volume down. Then he stood, looked in the mirror, and realized for the first time he wasn't in control of the story anymore. His phone lit up again, this time with a text from an unknown number. "You think this ends with you?" The modern newsroom is a stage as much as it is a studio. On this evening when the segment finally aired, the stage lights were colder, sharper, and the urgency in host Elijah Dawes' voice carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken stories. The panel had convened under the title American Injustice in Plain Sight. But tonight the truth wasn't relegated to sweeping commentary. It became personal. Dawes leaned toward the camera. "We've all seen the video," he began, voice low, unflinching. "A black family humiliated during transit. No probable cause, no warrant, just being black in America." The screen spliced to the viral clip. Hawk's smug command, Janelle's guarded defiance, Marcus's quiet outrage, and Ayana's small figure pressed into her mother's side. And then, piercing it all, Hawk's voice, "You people always play victim." It reverberated across living rooms and social feeds. But Dawes did not stop there. "What many viewers don't yet know," he continued, "is that Marcus Robinson is not merely a target of this injustice. He is a nationally recognized investigative journalist whose work has shifted the conversation on systemic racial inequities." That one statement was seismic. The camera flashed to a clip of Marcus standing before a crowded auditorium, delivering his talk on the new red lines. His tone fierce, the audience rapt, and then to Janelle, accepting her hard-won prize for paint peels. "People leave," a series dissecting eviction protocols weaponized in the name of development. The visuals cracked open preconceptions. Even credentialed cameras used to seeing black suffering paused in dawning recognition. Outrage followed, but not the kind that leaves impressions on digital graves. This was the kind that stacks bricks, building pressure under systems that had grown complacent. Justice for the Robinsons raced across screens. Journalism while black carried nuance. Ayana Speaks became a rallying cry, fueled by imagination and grief. Ayana's whispered question, "Are we the bad people?" splintered into voices everywhere. Professors quoting her in glass lecture halls, students scrawling chalk hashtags in dormitory quads, activists chanting in virtual and literal streets. It wasn't just heartbreak anymore. It was indictment. And suddenly, the cultural shift was unmistakable. Meanwhile, Hawk's public image cratered. Hawk the harasser trended. His old blog, once hidden in digital shadows, was now scrubbed and reshared. Dozens of posts highlighted, each more damning than the last. He'd woven urban threats, pattern recognition, and damnable code words into a manifesto of fear that surprised no one on screen, but scandalized many. Even his name, once a formidable alias, became a unit of shame. At United's Crisis Nerve Center, panic filled the hall like static. Screens displayed surging metrics, tweets, articles, posts, more impressions than any corporate PR team had ever planned for. Executives scrambled. Legal drafted bulletins. Marketing tried to pivot, fumbled. A diversity statement became a boomerang. "We treat all customers fairly," the world replied. "Do you?" Then support started to evaporate. 3 major corporate sponsors announced reevaluation of contracts. One a hotel chain, another a national food brand, and a tech startup once proud of its transit partnerships. The message was clear: no one wanted their brand connected to this. Share prices trembled. The tone of the conversation had left the boardroom. In a hotel room outside Charlotte, the Robinsons sat in stillness. Ayanna slept at last, deeply, truly, the first time the trauma hadn't pulled her back awake. Her small chest rose and fell, fragile as the truth that had pierced her childhood. They hadn't yet responded to any media blitz. No interviews. No statements. They sat side by side, in darkness only broken by the glow of phones, mouths dry, hearts strangled by lingering disbelief. Janelle stared at the screen. Calls and texts multiplied every second. A retired mentor, a childhood teacher, former editors offering platforms. She tapped into a newsfeed, showing Ayanna's curled form. Overlaid text read, "She never wanted the spotlight, but maybe she's the light we needed." She nodded once, saturated by fairness and burden. Marcus exhaled. "They'll turn her into a symbol."
Janelle laid a hand on his. "She's already more than a symbol."
Across town, at United headquarters, an urgent email landed in the executive inbox. Ray Hawthorne status. Due to widespread exposure and multiple civil complaints, Derek Hawk Hawthorne has been placed on administrative leave pending full investigation and contract review. Effective immediately. Click. No sign-off. No nuance. Just administrative death. In his motel room, Hawk watched the alert with icy tension. He had gone in to hide from his rising infamy, but reality sat heavy in the mirrored reflection. He tried to change the channel. Interviews exploded across networks. Legal analysts pronounced him a liability. Journalists labeled him public enemy number 1 in transit. Racist. His phone vibrated. From an unknown number. "You think this is your undoing?"
Then another message. "We're dredging up old files."
The words appeared like bullets, and Hawk swallowed hard. So the world had seen them. Now they had to become more than their pain. And someone else was watching. Even the predator now knew the prey had power in name, truth and time. The only question now, what was he going to do when the world refused to look away? As Janelle and Marcus exchanged a weary glance, a third text pinged. "Live camera on your doorstep in 5. United's headquarters in Chicago had never moved with such urgency. What was typically a calculated, buttoned-down corporate machine now buzzed with the manic energy of a crisis in full bloom. The boardroom, usually reserved for quarterly forecasts and polished investor presentations, had been converted into a war room. 3 giant screens dominated the front wall. On one, Ayanna's trembling face frozen in a still from the viral clip. On another, Hawk's grainy blog posts plastered with red circles and annotations, courtesy of digital activists. And in the center, real-time analytics, mentions, retweets, sentiment metrics bleeding red across the board. By 9 a.m., every executive with a name that mattered was seated, tight-lipped, exhausted, and out of ideas. "This isn't going away," the PR director muttered. "Not this time." At exactly 10:15 a.m., United streamed its emergency press conference live on YouTube, Facebook, and 5 local news affiliates. They positioned their general counsel beside the CEO, both men looking freshly pressed but visibly strained. The stage was minimal, a single podium, a wall of neutral logos, no flags, no distractions. What followed was a textbook example of reactive corporate language. "We are deeply concerned about the footage that has surfaced. We have launched an internal investigation. We are committed to fair and safe travel for all customers." But this wasn't just another case of poorly trained staff or minor service disruption. This was a civil rights bomb detonated in public. And the journalists in the room knew it. First came the local affiliate reporter. Why did your contracted security personnel have the authority to remove passengers without probable cause? Then CNN. Are these security agents background checked, licensed or regulated by any federal agency? We've uncovered complaints filed against Mr. Hawthorne from 2017 and 2019. Why was he still working routes with direct passenger access? The CEO blinked. The general counsel shifted in his chair. We are reviewing all previous contractor records. This individual was technically employed through a third-party firm, though he operated under United's transport safety umbrella. That umbrella, one reporter shot back, is currently riddled with holes. Behind the scenes, the damage spread quickly. By noon, United had quietly suspended 4 regional contractor agreements covering 5 southern states. The statement came buried in a legal disclosure. No press release, no tweet, but digital watchdog groups caught it, screenshotted it, and made sure the public knew. One tweet went viral. Translation: United's been cutting corners with unregulated security for years. Now they're scrambling. No more Hawks. That hashtag trended for hours. Meanwhile, Hawk was in hiding. The motel room had become a bunker, dark and paranoid. The curtains were drawn tight, the TV muted, the walls closing in. His laptop sat open, screen bright with a half-typed resignation letter. He deleted his blog, his LinkedIn, his YouTube channel. Gone were the clips of security tips with Hawk. Gone were the posts boasting about urban pattern detection. He even tried scrubbing Reddit comments. But the internet doesn't forget. Within 24 hours, digital activists had archived everything. A spreadsheet circulated with time-stamped links, screenshots, and annotations. Each entry cross-referenced with known contractor cases, even speculative ones. They found an old police report from his days as an officer. Details redacted, but the victim's age and race were a 17-year-old black male. Charges dropped. No explanation. Another post revealed a private message he'd sent in a security forum. If they cry before you even search them, you've already won. That screenshot alone was shared over 800. The fallout rippled beyond United. Sheriff Dan Ryle's office received a formal notice. The Robinson family's legal team had filed a civil rights lawsuit for unlawful detainment. Racial profiling and emotional trauma included were affidavits from 6 other residents who claimed similar encounters with Riles or his deputies, some dating back nearly a decade. The county commissioner's office announced an internal review. Local newspapers published op-eds with damning titles like "Small-Town Policing, Big-Time Damage." Iana's question haunts us all. The face of the problem was never just Hawk. And Hawk? He was running out of exits. His phone vibrated. A blocked number. He answered anyway. The voice on the other end was tired, cold, and familiar. "Hawk, it's Mason. Legal." Silence. "You watching the feeds?" "I've been offline." "Well, you're on every damn one of them." More silence. Mason continued. "You need to resign. Publicly. Now." "No. That looks like guilt." "It is guilt, Derek. That's not a debate. You either resign, or they'll drag your entire past into the spotlight. You think this is just about one incident?" Hawk's throat tightened. Mason didn't wait for a reply. "They've got everything. Old complaints. Dashcam footage. Blog archives. You resign and we might control the narrative. You fight. You're done. Done in court. Done in life. Choose fast." Click. The call ended. Across the country, students held rallies. In D.C., a mural of Ayana's face was painted outside a charter school. Her question written underneath. "Are we the bad people?" Protesters gathered outside United terminals in Atlanta, Charlotte, and Nashville. No riots. No chaos. Just people holding signs, wearing black, and holding silence for 7 minutes straight. The length of time the Robinsons had been detained off the bus. The world was responding with more than likes now. It was moving. In their Charlotte hotel room, Janelle and Marcus sat shoulder to shoulder at the edge of the bed. The television played in the background, news loops they couldn't avoid, even if they wanted to. Ayana slept again, finally, head resting in Janelle's lap. Marcus scrolled through his phone. Messages kept coming in. Praise, support. A few veiled threats, mostly strangers saying thank you. He paused on one from a former college professor. "You taught truth for years. Now truth is demanding the world. Listen. He put the phone down. This doesn't feel like winning, he murmured. Janelle brushed Ayana's hair from her forehead. It isn't. But it feels like a beginning. At that exact moment, Hawk's resignation post went live, then vanished 2 minutes later, deleted without a word. Hawk's resignation, brief, defensive and quickly deleted, was never going to be the end. It was merely the first frame of a much larger, slow-burning collapse. Within 24 hours, a timeline began circulating on activist threads, Reddit investigations, and journalistic Slack channels across the country. It was headlined simply, "The Hawk Files, Years of Abuse in Uniform." The document was ruthless. Frame by frame, date by date, it pieced together incidents that had once slipped through the cracks, quietly closed, reports, scrubbed footage, unfiled complaints. It was no longer about a single moment on a Georgia bus. This was a reckoning. At the top of the list was a 2017 case in rural Alabama. A 14-year-old boy named Darnell Brooks, accused of acting suspicious near a Dollar General. The original report had described Darnell as uncooperative and fleeing, but then someone leaked the body cam footage, and the truth tore the air open. In the grainy footage, a young black teen in a red hoodie is walking slowly when Hawk approaches.
There's no raised voice, no threat, just a boy reaching for a phone in his pocket.
And then Hawk shoves him. Hard. The child stumbles, hits a ditch, and disappears from frame. The camera shakes. A grunt. Dirt. Silent. Then Hawk's voice. Stay down. Don't make it worse. That's it.
No resistance. No threat. No cause.
And yet the report filed that day told a different story. The suspect fell while resisting detainment. The case was closed within a week.
No charges, no press. The boy's family never saw the footage.
Until now, the video posted by a digital watchdog collective exploded. Within 5 hours, it was trending globally. Comments flooded in. He's done this before. That kid looks like my brother.
This man was never held accountable. Not once.
Journalists began pulling the thread. By morning, 6 more stories surfaced. A traffic stop in Mississippi where Hawk reportedly searched a mother's minivan, without consent. A Greyhound bus video from 2019, where he told a young woman, "You look nervous. That's a flag." An anonymous testimony from a former colleague who claimed Hawk would target the poor and the quiet because they never fought back. Every frame told the same story. Power unchecked. And now the nation was watching it all in rewind. Back in Charlotte, the Robinsons watched it unfold from a distance. Not physically, virtually, emotionally. They still hadn't spoken to the press. Not once. Janelle turned down every appearance request. Marcus declined interviews. Their publicist issued a single statement. The Robinson family will not speak until their daughter feels safe again. It wasn't about strategy. It was about survival. Iana had stopped drawing, stopped sketching. She barely slept without waking. No amount of viral momentum could rush healing. Still, the world didn't wait. Headlines carried their name daily. Protest signs in D.C., Chicago, and Atlanta quoted Marcus's bus-side phrase, "We know our rights." TikTok videos of Janelle's stare-down with Hawk were remixed into montage reels of resistance. But none of that could fix what had cracked inside their home. Meanwhile, Hawk had gone to ground. His lawyer managed one last statement, emailed to select outlets. "My client, Derek Hawthorne, is being targeted for doing his job." He followed protocols that existed long before him. This is scapegoating by public opinion.
The world responded with one word: coward.
Even former allies in fringe law enforcement forums distanced themselves. He brought heat we didn't ask for. Too sloppy. Should have stayed underground. He made us look like monsters. The very system that once protected him now closed its doors. He wasn't useful anymore. In their hotel suite, Marcus watched the clip from Twitter. His hands trembled. He'd seen hundreds of these grainy images of black pain. But this one wasn't abstract. It mirrored Hawk's posture from the bus. The same angle. The same aggression. The same silent expectation that no one would stop him. Janelle watched it too. She didn't flinch. But her eyes burned. This wasn't just one man, she said. This was routine. Marcus nodded slowly. We need to expose more than him. That night, as Iana finally slept, wrapped in a quilt stitched by her grandmother, Janelle's phone buzzed. Voicemail. Unknown number. She hesitated, then played it. A woman's voice, calm but sharp, filled the room. Janelle Robinson, this is Special Investigator Dana Miles. We've been reviewing the Hawk files you've seen circulating, and we believe this goes much deeper. There's a pattern tied to federal contracts, off-record transport patrols, and a chain of silence that's been protected for years. We'd like to talk, not off the record, on it. Janelle sat up straight. Marcus looked at her. She didn't say anything, but they both knew. This was no longer just about Hawk. And Nell replayed the voicemail twice. Then, slowly, she whispered, "They've been hunting in plain sight." In the weeks that followed the voicemail, the Robinsons didn't return to their old lives. They couldn't. The truth had expanded, widened like a crack in a dam, and now the weight of what they'd experienced demanded more than reflection. It demanded confrontation. They could have let it go. Let Hawk fall on his own. Let the news cycle swallow him and spit out the next scandal. But Janelle knew the story wasn't over. It never had been. Hawk was a symptom. The disease ran deeper. And so they shifted gears from survivors to investigators. They started in silence.
No announcement, no pitch, no bylines. Just Janelle's old habits and Marcus's quiet rigor, back in the game as if they'd never left it. They rented a short-term apartment in D.C. to stay close to legal resources and political developments. Ayana was enrolled in a temporary online program while her therapist built a routine around safety and expression. Janelle dug through databases at night, cross-referencing Homeland Security subcontractor lists, state transit contracts, and rural bus route budgets. Marcus reached out to his old network, other journalists, former DOJ analysts, private watchdogs who owed him favors. Within days, patterns emerged. Hawk wasn't an outlier. He was the template. Across 9 states, most of them in the Deep South and Southwest, third-party security agents operated with unchecked authority under vague contractor agreements. These men weren't trained by the TSA or subject to federal oversight. They were often ex-cops with histories of misconduct, or private citizens, licensed only by the loosest of state guidelines. Many wore tactical vests. Some carried weapons. Few wore body cams, unless mandated. And nearly all worked with immunity granted by legal gray zones. Contracts signed in quiet corners, protocols buried in transport policy documents. Nobody read. And the victims? Black and brown passengers, poor travelers, non-native English speakers. The invisible. Janelle found a report from Louisiana. A Haitian grandmother pulled off a bus in Baton Rouge after a scent alert triggered by a dog with no certification. Her luggage was dumped on the ground. No drugs were found. No apology issued. Marcus uncovered a case in rural Texas. A man detained for excessive eye contact. The report read like satire, but the man spent 6 hours in custody. He never filed a complaint, said he didn't think anyone would care. By the end of week 3, they had compiled 22 distinct cases across 9 states. Some were settled quietly. Most were forgotten before the ink dried. None had made national news. Until now. Meanwhile, Ayana was healing in her own way. She saw Dr. Vaughn twice a week, a soft-spoken black woman, with gentle eyes and a background in trauma-informed therapy for youth. They painted together, read aloud, rewrote the script of the bus scene in safer, softer terms. One afternoon, Ayana handed Janelle a folded piece of paper. "I wrote something," she said. Janelle opened it. Inside, in careful handwriting, was a poem titled, "Not the Bad Ones." They stared like we were trouble. But we were just going home. They said we looked wrong. But I know what right feels like. Mommy said not to cry. But my tears came anyway. We're not the bad ones. We just look like the ones they fear. But I won't be afraid of mirrors. Janelle read it 3 times, then folded it back up and hugged her daughter tighter than words could manage. They published their report 2 days later. Gray Lines, the hidden abuse of America's transit security pipeline. It wasn't just a story, it was an exposé. Janelle handled the narrative. Marcus handled the data. Together, they made the invisible visible. The story spread like wildfire across major networks. News anchors quoted Janelle's opening line. "The problem isn't that no one saw. The problem is they were never meant to look." Panels were assembled. Senators called for inquiries. United issued yet another statement, this time pledging a full-scale audit and terminating all active contracts with the firms listed in the report. But most powerful of all were the stories from readers. A mother in New Mexico wrote, "This happened to my son in 2021. I didn't know who to tell. Now I know I wasn't imagining it."
A college student in Mississippi posted, I rode the same line Hawk patrolled. I was always scared, always silent. Thank you for showing me I wasn't crazy. For the first time, the pipeline of abuse was public. Then came the invitation. It arrived in an envelope sealed with a government stamp, hand-delivered by a congressional aide. Marcus opened it at the kitchen table while Ayanna worked on a puzzle nearby. He read it once. Then again. Janelle walked in, her coffee still steaming.
What is it?
He held the paper out to her, his voice caught halfway between pride and disbelief. It's from the House Committee on Transportation Oversight. They want us to testify. Janelle stared at it. In person? Next week. D.C. Capitol Building. Full panel. Janelle sat down slowly. On record, he nodded. They want to know everything. Not just what happened to us. Everything we've found. Ayanna looked up from her puzzle. Does that mean people are going to listen to you now? Janelle smiled softly. No, baby. It means they have to. As the Robinsons prepared their testimony, an anonymous source emailed Marcus a chilling subject line. This goes higher than contractors. Look into federal liaisons. The chamber was still as Ayanna's voice echoed through the speakers. Her statement, pre-recorded on advice from her therapist, played just after the chairwoman called the hearing to order. The House Committee on Transportation Oversight had assembled in full, cameras rolling, C-SPAN live. Rows of journalists, advocates, and civil rights lawyers packed the back of the hall. But the room fell into reverent silence as the video began. Ayanna appeared on screen, seated beside a small lamp, her curls tied back, eyes clear but cautious. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a witness. My name is Ayanna Robinson. I'm 11 years old. I like art, clouds, and asking questions. I asked my mommy once if we were the bad people because the man with the badge made me feel like we were. But I don't believe that anymore. I think he was scared, but not of us. I think he was scared of the truth. The final line sat heavy in the room. After a brief recess, Janelle stepped forward. She wore a navy blazer and a quiet fire behind her eyes. The folder in her hand contained testimony, exhibits, and data, but she opened it not to read stats, but to recite Ayanna's poem. Not the bad ones. We just look like the ones they fear. But I won't be afraid of mirrors. We are not the bad ones. We are the broken-hearted ones who dream better. She paused. You've read our story. You've seen the video. But you haven't seen what it did to a child's spirit. And while my daughter had the words to express her pain, many don't. They carry it quietly. To school, to work, to funerals, on buses just like the one where this all started. Her voice didn't tremble. It landed. And in that room, something shifted. Marcus followed, walking the committee through the contractor loopholes they'd uncovered. Outdated contracts, jurisdictions evading federal oversight, a legal trail designed to protect companies, not people. But it was his final statement that cut deepest. You say the system failed us. But the truth is, the system did what it was built to do. The question is, will you keep pretending it can't be unbuilt? The testimony went viral within hours. Clips from Ayanna's video and Janelle's reading played across news outlets, from MSNBC to TikTok. Civil rights leaders called it a turning point. Online commenters called it a reckoning. And in the days that followed, United announced a major settlement with the Robinson family, undisclosed in dollar amount, but widely reported to be 7 figures. But more importantly, they announced a full audit, an overhaul of their contractor program. Effective immediately, all third-party security would be subject to new federal vetting protocols and onboard accountability systems. Hawk's name was never spoken in the press release, but his shadow lingered in every bullet point. The Robinsons didn't stop there. With the settlement, they launched Mile 12, a nonprofit named after the location where their story began. The mission provide legal, emotional, and financial support to families targeted during transit, due to race, language, or identity. Within the first month, they'd already received 38 inquiries from across the country. One letter stood out, handwritten, mailed from South Dakota. We watched your hearing on a cracked screen in a shelter. I was scared to get on the bus with my kids. Now I feel like maybe we'll make it. Janelle kept that letter by her desk. Ayanna returned to in-person school in the fall. Her teachers gave her space. Her classmates asked careful questions. Some kids just sat beside her in quiet solidarity. During open mic day, she recited her poem aloud. No one said a word, until the last line. And then, all at once, real, loud, pealing applause. 6 months later, they boarded a bus again. Not because they had to. Because they chose to. It was a symbolic ride. Atlanta to Charlotte. Same route, same hour of the day, but this time the staff greeted them with warmth. Passengers offered nods of recognition, not of pity but of respect. The driver paused before they pulled out. "Mr. Robinson," he said. Marcus looked up. "Thanks for what y'all did." Janelle squeezed his hand. Iana looked out the window. Calm. Settled. She pulled out a pen and began to sketch the clouds. As the bus merged onto the interstate, the camera panned back through the window, into the sky, where the story had once cracked open. And in a final voiceover, Janelle narrated the close. "Sometimes the road home is the one we build ourselves, mile by mile, truth by truth." Fade to black, but as the credits rolled, one final frame remained. A question typed across the screen. But what if the next family isn't famous? And just like that, the weight returned. The work remained. The story wasn't over. No family should have to prove their humanity just to get home. If Iana's question made you pause, if her poem made you feel, then this isn't just their fight, it's ours. Type yes if you believe in justice. Subscribe if this broke your heart.